To be back, isn't it? It's so good to be back after a small break, and I'm sure everybody had a wonderful time with their friends and family and for Christmas. But I was just waiting to get back and get back into the normal flow of study and Torah and food for our soul. This week we are in Parsha Vayigash. Parsha Vayigash is in the book of Genesis, chapter 44. I think it starts from verse 14, verse 18 onwards. So if you all have your Bibles, please turn with me to Genesis chapter 44, verse 18. Now we kind of missed a few parshas in between because everything was out of action. But in the last parsha, that's Parsha Miketz, Parsha Miketz, we see the story of how Yosef planned and put his cup into Binyamin's sack, and he accuses all of his brothers of being thieves. And so now the antagonistic relationship between Yosef and his brothers start. And Pasha Vayigash, that starts from here, is now about this long soliloquy or this discourse that happens between two kings. Who are the two kings? The two kings, one is Yosef, obviously, because he is in the place of the king of Paro, and Yehuda. Yehuda also is kingdom, because the scepter, the Bible says, the scepter shall not depart from Yehuda. He is kingdom, he is royalty. And these two kings are going at it, and they're defending the cause, each one. And so we're going to understand this conversation, and we're going to understand the reconciliation, and we're going to look at a broader picture of the relationship between Yosef and his brothers. In verse 18, finally, it's Yehuda who stands up to Yosef, and he says this. He says, Vayigash elav Yehuda, Vayomer bi Adonai, Vaydaberna Avdecha Davar Be'azani Adonai Ve'el Yachar Afekha Be'avdecha Ki Kamocha Ki Paro. Then Yehuda, it says, went up close to Yosef and said, Please, my Lord, let your servant appeal to my Lord, and do not be impatient. Do not show your yachar affect, your hot anger that can flare up in your face with your servant, because you are just as good as Paro to us. Now you have to ask a question, why is Yehuda doing this? You had Reuven over there, you had Shimeon over there, who's basically in jail. Then you had Dan, Naphtali, had all of the brothers over there. Binyamin is also in the midst, and Binyamin is accused of holding the cup, right? Out of all of this, it is Yehuda who stands forward and comes before Yosef. And now, in a way, these are two kings negotiating for their lives. But although Yehuda sounds very, very politically correct, he sounds very, submissive, but it's a very strong intonation of also a challenge to Yosef. And Yosef understands the power of his brothers. You see, he knows them very, very well. He knows how cruel they can be. He knows how violent they can be. You remember Reuven and Levi were the two ones who took their swords and they went and they slaughtered everyone in Shechem over what happened about Dinah, their sister. Cruelty runs in their blood, really. But Yehuda now being royalty, and the beauty of being kingly or wearing a crown is understanding restraint, understanding that you need to be or have clarity with restraint in your words, in your approach, in your request, how you negotiate a situation. All this is very, very necessary. And those are kingly qualities. The other brothers are not of that level. Therefore, kingdom is given to Yehuda. But before we understand why Yehuda comes on the front, let us take a small backward understanding of why Yehuda has to come forward now. You see, Yehuda comes forward because he's taking responsibility for his past actions. What were his past actions? Yehuda was the one who said, "Don't kill him. Don't kill Yosef. Let's sell him. Let's rather get rid of him rather than spilling blood." And because of that one action of selling his brother, things turned out very, very difficult for Yehuda. Very, very difficult. Because immediately after he sold and they returned back and they give that false story and narrative to Yosef, to Yaakov, and say, "See, this is your son's garment. He's been torn by a beast and he's dead." And Jacob literally dies. Literally dies. He's like a stone. He cannot, he doesn't have that life anymore. But all is not good between Jacob and his sons. All is not good. Because Jacob knows something is amiss, and his brothers have that guilt on their conscience. What have we done? How do we face our fathers? The impact is greatest to Yehuda, not Reuben, not the other brothers, because they wanted to kill him, but they didn't. It is Yehuda who actually sold him. So Yehuda now is dealing with this guilt and this huge burden, and he cannot take it anymore. So what do we see in the earlier chapters? It says, Yehuda left Bethlehem and he came down into the Shephelah. And there he met this business partner of his, Shlach, and he marries somebody out there, his daughter, and he literally descends spiritually. And now, when somebody descends spiritually, you start affecting yourself with all the other elements that are not supposed to be there. Business partners with this, with that, with unbelievers, with a whole lot of stuff that's happening around him. And but who redeems him out there? It is his daughter Tamar, who does something absolutely absurd, right? She goes, she dresses like a harlot, she comes and she seduces him, and that's a story which goes, and then it is that action, that wrong action of Tamar, is the one who actually awakens within Yehuda a repentance. And he says, "You are more honorable than me." And that when he comes back from that, finally he realizes that, he needs to get back. And now this is his restitution. So what does he do? Now, because he sold Yosef, he has to take responsibility, or this concept of arvot, guarantee for Binyamin. Because Binyamin is the only son that's left from Rachel. All the Leah's children are alive, Yosef is missing, and Binyamin is still there. And if you go to see, historically, Binyamin gets very, very close to Yehuda. In fact, even geographically, the two tribes that remained are Binyamin and Yehuda in the south, and the other 10 tribes of Israel were in the north. So they have a very special bonding. Yehuda has a very special bonding with Binyamin. The Beth HaMikdash, Jerusalem, is not in Yehuda territory. It's in the territory of Binyamin. If you knew this, or if you didn't know this, it is in the territory of Binyamin. So here, Yehuda steps forward as king. He's taking the role of leadership as king, and he is rectifying, he's completely rectifying his past actions. Therefore, he steps forward, but in a firm manner. And then he has this long discourse with Yosef that, you know, in other words, he's telling Yosef, why are you doing this to us? There are people coming from all over the world for food and coming and buying grain for food. You are not treating them like how you treat us. Once you bring us in and you treat us like royal guests, and the second time you make us slaves and accuse us and you do this to us, what are you doing? We're a little confused. Can you please clarify, why are you doing this to us? Why are we being targeted, basically? So then he says, Adonai sha'al et avduv le'amor hayesh lachem av o ech. My Lord asked his servants, have you a father and have you a brother? And then bring your brother. Is my father alive? And all these questions. What has this got to do with anything? What do you want from us? Please, can you just clarify your intentions? And then we convey that we have our own father. And you see, Yosef is trying to probe and extract out some things that he needs to ascertain before he reveals himself. Because he knows his brothers. He knows how cruel and difficult they are. So he needs to know that his brother Binyamin is safe. That's validated. Whether his father's still alive. And a whole lot of other things which probably is not, between brothers and between big families. He is trying to make sure that his brothers have actually changed. They have, they've repented for what they've done. And then the story goes on that you asked us to bring our brother Binyamin, and here he is, but you cannot keep him. You've accused him, but if you keep him, his father is going to die. In his stead, you take me as a slave. And that changes everything. It changes the full status quo with Yehuda and Yosef. And this is very important to understand now, because that self-sacrificing attitude shows a deep level of repentance on Yehuda's side. And Yosef knows immediately that the man has changed. The man has changed. It's very, very important. Now, typically in big families, let me just run through big families. What happens is when you have a lot of sons and immense amount of children, it's a very difficult thing to manage. And each successive child that's born gets most attention. Like I remember, we're 7 in our family. And so before I was born, my grandmother was so fond of my other brother before me, and she was his pet, and she used to give him everything. Come here, my son, take this, take that. The day I was born, and I was the youngest in the family, oh Lord, me with my big chubbiness and the curly hair and all this stuff came in, finished. I mean, I became the pet overnight. And the siblings were like, look at this, as long as this boy didn't came, now we used to be pet, now every full attention is gone. So they used to get very irritated with me. The first chance they used to get, they used to poke me, irritate me, make me cry. They used to do all this stuff, and I used to remember all this. Oh God. So, I mean, this is what happens in families, right? You have that, big families typically have this sibling rivalry and these things happen. But with them, it's a lot more serious. A lot more serious. And this is where I want you all to understand that Yosef is what we read and think of Yosef, you'll have to understand Yosef is arrogant. He is very arrogant. He's very sure. He's cocksure of himself. He is of a different level of consciousness compared to his brothers. He is flowing with some kind of mazal, some kind of flow that would make anybody jealous around him. I'll give you an instant as we keep going ahead. I will explain this. If you take Yosef in modern day terms, he would be someone who's just passed out from Stanford or some Ivy League, promising, uh, tremendously uh, intellectual, progressive, and entrepreneur. I'll tell you why. Do you remember the time when he's brought out of jail and Paro cleans him up, gives him a thing and makes him stand before him, and then Paro recounts his dream, and without hesitation, he he takes the dream and he gives him the answer to it. He said, "This is your dream," but it should have ended there. Paro only asked him, "Tell me what the dream is all about." But Yosef not only deciphers the dream, but he also gives him unsolicited advice. Now, you all may not have caught this when you're reading the Bible. What does he say? After he talks about the 7 good years and 7 years, then he tells Paro, find out a person who's wise and understanding in all your kingdom and set him above this and let him do this and let him do this and this and this and this and this. And once Paro hears the entire presentation that Yosef gives, he says, man, this guy is of some, this guy's an Ivy League character. He has got a plan, he's got a presentation, he's got a solution. Pick him up. This is exactly who Yosef is. If it had been any of his other brothers, they would have been like, who cares? I got sheep to shuffle around, I've got herd goats, I've got cattle to ranch around. No. But not Yosef. Yosef is of a different quality, a different breed of a person. He is there, he's present, he's arrogant, he's in front, he's competitive, he's progressive, he is he's the future. He is so much more than what you think he is. And this is what doesn't connect with his brothers, because his brothers at the end of the day are very simple guys, herding sheep and goats and this, and they're just normal people working in tents. No, Yosef is miles ahead in this way, because there is a divine flow that's flowing through Yosef, and people around him do not understand this. Therefore, he was hated among his brothers. Therefore, he was looked down. He was demeaned among his brothers. But not to say that he was also arrogant. He did. He would boast on their face. He say, "Hey, brothers, come here. I had a dream last night. My sheaf got up, and all you other sheaves were bowing to my sheaves." You can't say like this to your brothers then, especially if they're elder to you. They'll catch him, they'll whack the nonsense out of you. They've probably done it. This is why they hated him. So he was brash, he was arrogant, he was competitive, he was all these things, and moreover, he was a tail tattler. He would go, look around, see all the bad things his brothers were doing, and he would come and tell his father. And they hated him for it. Hated him for it. So there is something about Yosef that we need to understand, that he was of a different caliber, but the maturity was not there to channelize that divine light flowing through him. Therefore, what happened? He went through this process of being lowered down. He was taken, he was put into the well, he was sold, then he was made a servant in Potiphar's house, he was put in jail, he served 12 years. And what happened ultimately in the last 12 years of his life? When the winemaker and that bread guy, he told them, he says, if you ever get out, he says, please remember me. Please remember me, he told them. Right? They forgot about him. The wine cup bearer forgot about him until the dream. Right? He said, please remember me. He came to a point of complete bitul. What do you call this? This is called bitul, nullification. And bitul is a very big thing in terms of understanding and linking human dynamics in your relationship with God. Because without bitul, a nullification of of the negative things inside of you, you are not going to be able to have a good relationship with God. Now, when I talk about Bitul or we talk about nullification, it's not that you take yourself and you zero who you are as a person, because you are a person, a living, breathing, loving, compassionate, kind person. That's not what needs to be nullified. What needs to be nullified is, one is your idea and concept of submission to a higher power than you. Point number one, where you get this lowliness in your spirit, in your soul. Yeshua himself says, I'm lowly of spirit. Therefore, you can compare, if you really want to compare, when it says that the Son of God, he became nothing, he came down into this world, and he became like you and me in this place of complete nullification. He came down to a place of complete you and me, and he had this compassion and kindness, and that spiritual nullification that even Yeshua went through while on this earth can be comparable to this process of what Yosef also is going through, right? But this process is also fraught with other things. You know, it's not easy going to this process of bitul or this rectification. It's not easy. Or this nullification. David himself says in the book of Psalms, he says, my heart is empty for you, O Lord. Which means he has gone through this bitul, this nullification, through fasting and through prayer and to trials and tribulations and so many things that is taught and learned, and he has learned that life is full of these experiences that humble you, make you lowly, make you submissive to the will of God. That you remain who you are as a person, but you remove all those things that bring pride and arrogance and that that extra leaven and ego, all that needs to be dealt with in your life. When you come to this point of bitul, nullification, then you are truly ready for your glorification. And you see Yosef now, finally has been all that he's gone through. From this place of a young teenager, 17-year-old boy, arrogant, talking about being this and being that and this thing. Even his father and mother told him, what do you think your father and mother are going to bow down before you? What are you saying? Behave yourself. Jacob told him that. So he has gone through this process now, but he needs to be humble. He needs to go through this nullification. So all that you read of Yosef, we look at the brothers as if, they hate him, they're cruel, they're this. That's true, without any doubt. But Yosef is he is also, it takes two hands to clap. And this is what we understand from Yosef's side, right? But the brothers don't look at things like this. You and me, we need to look at our lives in such a way and understand that God is in control of everything. If we are in a place of, if there's flow inside of us, when I say flow, there's a saying among the Jewish people, they say mazal tov, they say mazal tov, or congratulations. Okay, let the flow be with you. It's a very big thing. People don't realize this. That if God's favor and flows with you, everything that you say, do, and everything that you perform is pure success. And it's exemplified around you. People look at you and say, man, what kind of blessing is this? What kind of person is this? This has got tremendous amount of mazal. But if you're not mature enough to handle kind of mazal, you are going to be brought down to a place of nullification. And once you come to this place of nullification, then you will be awarded that royalty and the kingship of what you're supposed to. And this is what happened with Yosef until he came down to that place, right? of pure nullification. Then he was brought out from the pit. He was brought, and overnight, from being in the pit, he became the viceroy, he became the regal of Egypt. Tremendous position. Can you imagine just overnight? In a couple of hours, he was just from here down to top. But in all of this, Yosef learned to channelize that mazar and use it correctly. He could have, you see, in Egypt, he never had the arrogance he had back home. Never. In front of Paro, he used a little of it. He interpreted the dream, and he also gave him unsolicited advice. That advice was good. It was a good presentation. And Paro said, wow, can we find any human being, any man who has the spirit of Elohim inside of him? Come, he says, takes out a ring, says, take it. And two things. One, he says that you will be second in command in Egypt. And everything that you say and do, people will listen to you. They will. Let me take that. I'll see. In everything that you do and say, people will know you, will acknowledge you. And you will travel with me in my chariot. And as he was traveling in the chariot with Paro, people would say abrek, abrek, which means from the word barakah, to bow the knee. To bow the knee. Now this is very big. Now this should, click your mind and tell you that for the Torah states, in the Bible states, that to Yeshua, every tongue will confess and every knee shall bow. Isn't it? So Yosef also went through this process that gives us a glimpse of what Yeshua also would have gone through by coming from the highest of the heavens in a place of pure nullification. He made himself as a form of a man in a lowly state, right? And he learned obedience as a son. These are not my words, these are the words of the Torah, of the scriptures, friends. And he learned obedience as a son, and once he learned even unto death, then he was crowned with glory and with splendor. Now, when we look at Egypt, Mitzrayim that you say, Egypt, in this story, Egypt is like the Gentile world, not the Jewish world, the Gentile world. And Yosef has been thrust into the Gentile world. He's there. He's there in the Gentile world. And what is he doing in the Gentile world? He is bringing light to the Gentile world. They are being blessed by him. He gives them food and grain, and he tides over the 7 years of hardship and famine that has plagued the entire earth. People from afar, from other nations, come to him in Egypt and say, please give me food. And as long as he's in Egypt, he's able to be a light to the world. Because Egypt at that point of time would probably have been the greatest empire on this earth, in the world. And he was the epicenter of it. Much like Yeshua, who's not with the Jewish people today. He's with Christianity. He's with the Western world. He's with Rome. He is with Esav. He's with the world today. And the world is flocking to him for light, food, for succor, and for spiritual enrichment. It's exactly what's happening, friends. Exactly what's happening. Now the relationship with his brothers is such. You all know the relationship between Yeshua and the Jewish people, right? It's not good. So that's also playing out right now, playing out big time. And Yehuda is the one now who stands up and it says Vayigash, and he approached. But he approached so he could speak only to Yosef. As I said, two kings are talking to each other. Okay, let's go ahead. I'll give you a little background of that. In verse 33, it says, Ve'ata yashevna avdecha tachat hanahar av eved le'adonai ve'hanahar va'al am akiv im akiv. Therefore, please let your servant, that's me, Yehuda, remain a slave to my Lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. You see how everything's changed for Yehuda now. Everything's changed for Yehuda. This is his rectification, because he's realized that I have been the instrument of destroying one son of my father, and I cannot allow this to happen again with the other son. He was still carrying the guilt of Binyamin, of Yosef. Now, is he going to also do the same thing with Binyamin? Because he assured his father that I will bring Binyamin back. I will bring him back. For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father. Then says, Velo Yachol Yosef lehit afech lechol hanivaim nitzavim elav vayikra hotziu kolish. Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants. So there were all the courtiers around him, all the Egyptian courtiers around him. He couldn't take it anymore. When he realized that Yehuda has finally changed, he has repented, that Yehuda himself now has gone through this process of nullification, of this Bitul, like how he has gone through the process of Bitul. Therefore, he is elevated today. Yehuda is also in this process of Bitul, but he's still not elevated. He is still not elevated because he's not reached that level, but he's showing promising signs of this nullification. Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out saying, Depart from me, everybody, all you courtiers, all you Egyptians, just leave me, go. Now think in the heat of the moment, because they're having a heated conversation. How dangerous is it for him to be alone with the 12 brothers? How dangerous is it? Very dangerous. He said, Have everyone withdraw from me. So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Why? Because this is kingly attribute, this is wisdom, and this is restraint. That he never, in all that they done to him, he never wanted to make them look low in the sight of the Egyptians. Because if that happened, they would have also looked down upon Yosef. Yosef would have lost his stature among the Egyptians. So he sent the Egyptians out, and then he revealed himself to his brothers. They only heard the cries from out. They never knew what happened. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. They were like, 1 second, why are these people crying? What's happening out there? Crying. The reconciliation is happening between brothers. Friends, I tell you one thing. Jewish people will accept Yeshua one day. It may be tomorrow, it may be the after, it may be a couple of years ahead. We don't know when. But the day they accept their brother, it's going to be a different time altogether, friends. And the little that we have seen of the blessings that flow will be nothing compared to when they reconcile again. Now turn with me and we're going to look at the Haftarah. Basically, we'll understand what this reconciliation is going to be in the future. Right? You go to the Haftarah. The Haftarah is in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, that comes on the heels of something very, very important. Haftarah is in Ezekiel 37, starting from verse 15. If you know what is the first 15 verses of 37, it's very, very interesting. Maybe I'll touch upon it. But let's read from verse 15 onwards. And let's understand what the reconciliation is. It says, Vahi daver Adonai Elai lemor. And the word of God came to me, Ve'ata ben Adam chak lecha etz echad u katov elav leYehuda ve'livnei Israel. Kaveru ulechak etz echad u katov elav leYosef etz Ephraim ve'chol bait Israel hakabaru. And you, O mortal, Adam, take a stick and etz. I want you to understand the word etz, Ain Sade, etz, is actually the word for a tree. And the tree is very, very similar to a human being, or rather, the strength of a tree, the growth of a tree is what is the human bone structure. The bone structure of human, because the human bone is called etzem in Hebrew. So the difference between a tree and the human bones is practically nothing. There's no difference between the two from a biblical point of view. So etz, tree, and etzem, the bones. The bone structure of a human being is very, very unique. First, it gives strength and stability. And the bones is where you get your marrow and your stem cells. That is the powerhouse of your DNA structure of who you are. Scientists today are stumbling upon, stem cells theory, and they're doing a lot of stuff. The Bible is way ahead of all these things. Torah is way ahead of all these things. Etzem, your bones, or etz, is very important. Here, God tells Ezekiel, it says, Chak lecha etz, take for yourself a branch of a tree. And write on it, Yehuda and the other Israelites who are attached to him. There's Benjamin and all these. And take another stick, another etz, and write on it, Yosef, the stick of Ephraim, not Menashe, Ephraim, and all the house of Israel associated with them. Bring them close. Why karev? You know the word karev and the word korban. Bring them into this karib, into this korban kind of situation, and bring them into this oneness. Ve karav otam echad el echad. One on one. They will practice this korban and this nearness, the two of them, these two sticks. Lecha, for you. He's telling Ezekiel, this is for you to understand what I'm trying to do. Take these two sticks, one for Yehuda and his other Israelites, and one is Ephraim of Yosef, and you join them together, literally fuse them together, and they will become one in your hand. Bring them close so that they become one stick, joined together in your hand. How can you take two sticks and join them and they become one? So it's not really talking about the sticks. It's talking about this etzem. It's talking about the very fabric, the DNA of being Jewish Israelite. Very, very important to understand this. Then it says, when any one of your people ask you, won't you tell us what these actions of yours means? I mean, the people around them are saying, Ezekiel, what are you doing? What is it all about? And mind you, Ezekiel he is in Galut, he's in exile when all this is happening. They're in Babel, they're in Babylon. And God is giving him this word when he's in Babylon. When any one of your people ask you, won't you tell us what these actions of yours mean? Answer them. Daver Elohim, ho amar Adonai, hine ani lokeach et etz Yosef asher beyad Ephraim ve'yeshavti Israel yechabru v'natati otam elav et etz Yehuda ve'asitam le'etz echad ve'hayu echad beyado. And I will place the stick of Yehuda upon the stick of Ephraim, and make them into one stick, and they shall be ve'asitam, and I will produce out of them one stick, le'etz echad, in oneness, and there will be echad beyado, in my hand, God says. This is very essential to understand what's going to happen in the future. At some point of time, the Jewish nation of today will accept their brother Yeshua. And this is going to cause panic in the Christian world. I am telling you this, friend. I don't care whether you're liking what I'm saying or not, but it is true, it's going to happen. And let's see what God says. You shall hold up before the eyes the sticks that you have inscribed, and you shall declare to them, thus says the sovereign God, I am going to take the Israelite people from among the nations they have gone to, and gather them from every quarter and bring them into their own land. I will make them a single nation in the land on the hills of Israel, and one king shall be king of them all. Never again shall there be two nations, that's Israel and Judah, and never again shall they be divided into kingdoms. Why were the kingdoms divided? Why were the kingdoms divided? They were divided because of the hate and of the mindless, baseless hatred between the brothers. But moreover, there's something very specific that happened that divided the entire Jewish people into two, Yehuda and Israel. You know what it was? It was a sin of King David HaMelech. You see, when God looks at a husband and wife, it's a very sacred thing to him, an extremely sacred thing to him. Breaking up of a husband and wife is as good as breaking up a kingdom. Listen to what I'm saying. When David ran after Bathsheba and broke that family and ordered Uriah the Hittite, her husband, to be killed in battle, God didn't like it. God said, the kingdom will be torn from you. It will be split in two. Because you split a husband and wife, oh man, you see, this is very, very precious in the sight of God. What happened finally? He says, never does not happen in your time. Once the role of Shlomo HaMelech was over, the kingdom split in two. 10 tribes on top, and the 2 tribes, Yehuda and Binyamin, below. They split in two. This should have never happened. But God is so just in the things that he does now. So just. Although he was with David HaMelech, and he said, David HaMelech, a man after my own heart, but yet he had to bring David HaMelech into this punishment, and the punishment came upon the Jewish people. So, I'm reiterating what I'm saying. Husband and wife is a very precious thing in the sight of God. David HaMelech broke that, and he lied, he connived, and he murdered for it. Therefore, the kingdom was broken. Do you understand the quantum of this punishment? And the people of Israel had to pay for it. And they went through all sorts of trouble because of this. They even went into exile. All this that happened after this was all the result of that one sin of David. He carried that guilt. Now, what we're reading here is God saying that after all this is done, after that thing is expiated, the full sin has been washed clean, then I will bring them all together again as one. That entire episode of David Amalek has been paid for and cleansed. Now I'm going to bring them back again together again. Never again shall there be two nations, and never again shall they be divided into two kingdoms. Nor shall they ever again defile themselves by their fetishes and the abhorrent things that they've done when they were two kingdoms by the other transgressions. I will save them in their settlements where they sinned. I will purify them. Then they shall be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David shall be king over them. Now this should make sense to you. What started with David has to end with David. There shall be one shepherd for all of them. They shall follow my rules and faithfully obey my laws. Thus they shall remain in the land that I gave to my servant Yaakov. I'm reading this again. Vayashavu al haaretz asher natati le'avdi leYaakov asher yashavu ba. Avotchem vayashavu eleha hema ובניها ובני בניהם עד עולם ודוד עבדי נשיא להם לעולם. And they shall remain in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, in which your ancestors dwelt. They and their children and the children's children shall dwell there forever. My servant David as a prince for all time. Now this is beautiful. Verse 26, it says, Vekharati, and I will cut keret. I will cut with them lahem brit shalom. I will cut with them a covenant of shalom. Very beautiful. With who? With Ephraim, with Yosef and his Israelites, and Yehuda and his Israelites. The two will become one. Yosef, Menashe, Ephraim. Jacob says, Ephraim and Menashe shall be like Reuben and Shimon, sons of me. That means even Reuben, even Menashe and Ephraim, though born of Yosef outside the land of Israel, born to Asinat, who's the daughter of Potiphar, who are not from a Jewish line, that resembles the Gentiles that are coming in, the fullness of the Gentiles, they will be as Jewish tribes, the two tribes. They will replace Levi and Joseph, and they will be part of the 12 tribes. Even the Gentiles will come in and will be part of the 12 tribes of Israel. And I will make a covenant of friendship with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant. It says, Vekharati lachem brit shalom. Brit olam yihiyaye otham ve u netatim vehirbeiti otham ve netati et migdashi betocham leolam. And I will establish them and multiply them, and I will place my mikdash, my sanctuary or temple, betocham. It doesn't say betoch. If you know the Hebrew, it doesn't say betoch. It says betocham. Remember the verse in Exodus 35, it says, Vayasuli mikdash veshakhanti betocham. And ask them to produce a place for me so that I can dwell inside of them. Betocham, inside of them, within them. He's saying the same thing here. And I will place my mikdash, betokham leolam. World over worlds, in all different levels of the world, my sanctuary will be betokham, inside of them. Within them, with them, inside of them, everything. So very great, friends. Listen to this. It's very, very great. Vehaya mishkani alehem vehayiti lahem leelohim vehema yihayuli leam. And my presence veshakhanti mishkani, my presence alehem will be on them. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Who? Even Ephraim and Menashe, that represent the fullness of the Gentiles, will be part of the two Jewish tribes that join the 12 tribes and complete the 12 tribes. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Veyadu ha goim ki ani Adonai mikdash et Israel behayot mikdashe betocham leolam. And when my sanctuary abides among them forever, the nations shall know that I, God, to sanctify Israel. Very interesting. Now, this comes on the heels of something very important. And if you have not caught this, now listen very carefully. In the same chapter, we read from verse 18 onwards, right? No, from verse 15 onwards. But let's read from a little above. This is the valley of the dry bones. The valley of the dry bones, God says, thus says the sovereign Lord, from verse 6 onwards. Well, let's read from verse 1. Let's cover these 15 verses. God's hand came upon me. I was taken out by the Spirit of God and sat down in the valley. It was full of bones. What is bones, I told you? See. Vahita alai yad Adonai vayodzeenu beruach Adonai vahi nechani betok habechiya vehi malea etzemot. They were full of etzem. They were full of bones. The two sticks, the bones. And God led me all around them. There were many of them spread over the valley, and they were very, very dry. And I was asked, O mortal, can these bones live again? I replied, O my sovereign God, only you know this. And I was told, prophesy over these bones, say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of God. And then thus said the sovereign God, to these bones I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live again. I will lay sinews upon you, and cover you with flesh, and form skin over you, and I will put breath into you, and you shall live again, and you shall know that I am God. What is it talking about? Not valley of dead. This is talking about the concept of Tekiyat HaMetim, resurrection of the dead. This is from where you get the concept of Tekiyat HaMetim, resurrection of the dead. I prophesied as I've been commanded, and while I was prophesying, suddenly there was a sound of rattling, and the bones came together, bone to bone, matching bone. I looked, and there were sinews on them, the flesh had grown, the skin had formed over them, but there was no breath in them. Then God said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, O mortal, say to the breath, thus says the sovereign God, come, O breath, from your four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live again. I prophesied as was commanded, the breath entered them, they came to life, stood up on the feet, a vast multitude. And I was told, O mortal, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Who are they? The whole house of Israel, present, past, and the future, everything put together. They say, our bones are dried up, our hope is gone, we are doomed. Therefore say to them, prophesy, says the sovereign God, I am going to open your graves and lift you out of your graves, O my people. Now this is the beautiful part, if you would want to hear it. Thus says the sovereign God, I am going to open your graves and lift you out of your graves, O my people, and bring you into the land of Israel. I am going to open your graves and lift you out of your graves, O my people, and bring you to the land of Israel. You shall know, my people, that I am God, and I have opened your graves and lifted you out of your graves. I will put my breath into you, and you shall live again. I will set you upon your own soil. Then you shall know that I, God, have spoken and have acted, declares God. Then we come to verse 15 that talks about the Etzem. Why? Because now the Etzem has to come together. The Judah and Ephraim have to come together into one Etzem, and also bring Ephraim and the Gentiles all together inside this one thing. They have to all become Israel of God, as Galatians 6:16, and brought together as one people. Then the top says, and I will raise you out of your graves and put my spirit into you, and you will rise up from the resurrection dead, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. Whatever that means, I want you all to think about this. Very, very important. It's essential to understand that God is very strategic in the things that He does. This reconciliation is very, very important from a biblical aspect of things, friends. It's very important. And if you don't understand this reconciliation as to why Yehuda and the Jewish people have to be reconciled back to Yeshua, and how that's going to turn out in the end, everything's in the Bible. Everything's in the Bible. But these brothers now, what does it say finally? That they all were stunned. They were absolutely stunned when He revealed themselves to him. In chapter 45, Joseph could no longer control himself before all his death. Now take, for example, that Yeshua reveals himself to his Jewish brothers. And Joseph says to his brothers, Ani Yosef. Ani Yosef, he says, Vayomer Yosef el Achiv to his brothers, Ani Yosef. This word Ani Yosef, if I put this into Gematria, it's 217. Ani Yosef. 217 is equal to the word Ori, my light. Aleph, Vav, Resh, Yud. Ori, my light. Ani Yosef. I am Joseph. Is my father still well? He says, Ha'od Avi Chai. Until now is my father living. Velo Yachalu Achiv Le'anot Oto Ki Nechalu Mipanav. And his brothers could not answer him. So dumbfounded were they on account of him. They were just standing like blocks of ice. They couldn't just digest what was happening. They couldn't. And they still could not digest it even after the death of their father. Because after the death of their father, they said, as long as our father was alive, Joseph is going to look kindly upon us. But once he goes, I don't know how he's going to extract his revenge on us. They were mortally scared. Then Joseph said to his brothers, Vayomer Yosef el Achiv Gashuna. Come, please. The word now is please. Come, please. Come close. Elai Vayigashu Vayomer Ani Yosef. Come forward. Come. I am Yosef. Come. Etchem Asher Micharitam Otchi Mitzrayma. I am your brother Yosef, whom you sold to the Gentiles, to the world, to Rome, to Greek, wherever you sold them. I am he. But I went there to prepare a place for you. So that the Gentile world also, I'll tell you one thing. I was watching a documentary about uh, archaeology and about Egypt, and they're doing some major archaeology digs around Egypt today, and they found in the mummies of Imhotep, one of the pharaohs during Joseph's time. There were three pharaohs during Joseph's time. He reigned for about 80 years approximately. He was 40, 37 or 40 when he became the prime minister, and he was there for 80 years until he died. That, that's a long time. 30 years or something, and then he lived till 110. And he had three pharaohs underneath him. I mean, who he worked under. And they found the tombs of all these three pharaohs. And the first pharaoh, I think it was Imhotep, he has written a chronicle. It's even archaeology confirms this. It's in the stele. He writes on the stele saying that confirming the 7 years by the regal Zephanath Paniak. Okay, that's his Egyptian name, Zephanath Paniak, which means the person who reveals the unknown things or the secrets. Says that it was revealed by Zephanath Paniak about the 7 years and the things that were done because of that. And also, it says something really alarming in that stele that's written by the Paro. It says that the men in Mitzrayim were all circumcised by Yosef. Mind blowing. Just mind blowing. The Jewish culture so infiltrated because of Yosef and the brothers who finally came, became so much part of the Egyptian culture that when the third pharaoh came in, he started pushing back. But by that time, the Paro's daughter, Vidya, who you can say Bat Ya, daughter of Ya, was almost Jewish. That when she seen Moses, she picked up Moses and she took him. That's a different story altogether. I won't get into it. But that's all part. And from that same thing came out the Exodus and the redemption, friends. So what I wanted to share with you all today is that whether you are in this flow in life, if you're on top, and if you have the good sense and the maturity to hold this flow, good for you. If you don't have that flow, if you have the flow, you're not mature, you're going to go to this process of nullification, like Yosef. And you're going to come down till you tell the cupbearer, when you go out, please remember me. Don't let me linger here in this rot in this jail for the next 30 years, for the rest of my life. Please remember me. And truly, the wine bearer had forgotten him until the opportune time came before the Paro. Depends where you are. If the flow is there, either misusing it, or you're not mature enough, or you're mature enough, you're holding it, great. If you're not, you are going to go through a process of nullification. And then once you complete this process of Bitul nullification like Yosef, then you will be elevated. We think in our obscure small minds, I tell you, that a person who's bad is so bad that we discount the person and say, this person is no good, useless, get rid of him. God doesn't look at things like this. God understands that from that darkness and that chaos, he needs to extract light. He needs to separate light from that darkness. So that person also needs to go down, rectify, and come up. We have to start learning to think from biblical concepts, friends, and reflect on our lives. Who are we? At what level are we in life? Are we in that bitul, that nullification? Are we able to understand what God is doing with us? Are we antagonistic like the 12 brothers against Yosef? How God is, whether we are on this side or on this side, God is still using us. God is still in control of everything, my friends. Every single thing. and understand Yosef a little more. He is a fabulous character to understand. If you understand Yosef a little more, as I said, the man was an Ivy League person, really, because he came out not only with the interpretation, but the solution and the plan and everything, and he gave this fantastic presentation, way ahead of his time. And Paro was like, wow, what kind of guy is this, man? You are, I'm employing you right now. And he done wonders in Egypt. Wonders. See the potential of the man. But it is still God's grace and mazal, his flow in the life of Yosef. But he had to go to that process because of Bitul and nullification, friends. In so many ways, I think even the book of Hebrews talks about that although he was a son, he took down and he learned obedience, how to be a son. Talks about Yeshua. And I want you to understand this, that Yeshua also, no matter what you'll think of him, he had his process of learning. And he had this process of nullification to come down into nothingness where you and me are. He left everything on top. He came down to his nothingness. And he learned. And once he graduated by his death. Friends, he had to go through that. Yeshua had to go through this process of nullification. And think about these things and think about how perfect and just God is. There is no favor with God. There is no exception, even to his own son. Friends, keep this in mind. God bless. Shabbat Shalom. And good to see all of you back. We're going to get back into action every week now, friends. Tomorrow morning, we're going to have Shakari prayers at 7 o'clock. Tuesday, Darke Talmudim. And the usual things going forward. Please be in touch with the yeshiva. Okay. And keep coming. We're going to put the recording of Shabbat Shalom, friends.